welcome to Round Robin. I'm your host, Robin McCormick with the City of Hampton. And today we are going to talk about the father factor, the importance of a father in raising sons. My guests are Healthy Families Alvean Lyons and Pastor Kevin Swann. Welcome.
Thank you.
Hi, glad to be here.
You know, there's all these sort of stereotypes about dads out there. Mm-hmm. There's disciplinarian dad, you know, wait till your father comes home. There's absentee dad. There's sports dad. And the truth is, you have to be a lot of things.
A little bit of everything.
You do. And we talked previously about the importance of dads and daughters. Mm-hmm. And this gets back to being that model for young men.
Absolutely. And we forget sometimes how significant some of the small things can be. It's not about having everything perfect. We're never going to be perfect parents. Let's just break the news to everybody now, okay? And it's not, and our goal isn't to raise perfect children either. Really, our goal is wholeness. We need to raise whole and healthy human beings. And there are a few things that really contribute to that, particularly as a father in the relationship to his sons, whether you're a father inside the home or you're a father in support, because some of us are not biological fathers, but are really actively involved in the lives of young men who need to have a father or male role model in their lives.
So we're going to define fatherhood a little bit broadly.
Absolutely, because we don't live in a regular society, absolutely, where everything is absolutely traditional. But what does not change is the fact that every son needs to have a male role model in his life to be able to speak to what it means to be a good man when he gets older. So it seemed totally appropriate to bring a good man on the show to talk about those things who has a son himself.
Well, I appreciate that. So glad to be back. And last time I was here, I talked about my daughter. She's 16, and we have a son, Cole, who's 13. And so the differences.
Good luck.
Yes.
That's, you know,
the
that
differences.
is really a key age, though, where they're, you know, go from being cute little boys to the hormones kick in, and I don't know what to do with
them. And identity becomes very important.
The
peer group becomes important. You know, what we say as parents isn't as important as what the peers say about them and how they define them. And so it really becomes important for fathers to step in really before you get into middle school. But if you're going to be at this point, you know, the kids know about MTV, the VMA Awards, the Video Music Awards. And so I've adopted kind of the VMAs for fathers. You know, the first one really is vision. Every man has to see. We are visual creatures. We're stimulated by what we see. So helping boys to see something in their future as early as possible is very, very important. It gives them a sense of identity and ownership to really what they want to become. For me, it was early on. Fortunately, I found sports, and I see my son is kind of following in that path. But every boy doesn't like sports. So it's important for parents, fathers, to kind of expose their sons to different avenues. It may be music, it may be the arts, it may be entrepreneurship, it may be something else. But it's really important to help the young boys to be able to see something early, because then everything else starts to make more sense.
I think, you know, schools have gotten to be such an emphasis on SOLs and learning and drilling. And it's hard for me to be the stereotypical, but boys in a lot of cases are a little less buttoned down. They can't stay in their seat the whole time. Both of my kids had a little ADD in them. And it's really, they can get off track early because the school system isn't really designed for them right now.
They're not, and most kids, boys, are kinesthetic learners. You know, they're touchy. I have to, and you're asking a boy to sit in a desk for 6 hours a day at a minimum. That's very challenging. And
so they get labeled disruptive, or they get turned off. So this vision, you're talking about finding their passion and developing it.
So that helped us with school. So once he decided, hey, I want to pursue an avenue in sports, now academics starts to make more sense. Well, if you want to play sports, to be on the team, you have to maintain a certain grade point average. And so now it gives them purpose. Otherwise, when boys and men don't have vision, they wander. Things don't make as much sense. So you find yourself just kind of going around and around and around. But it's when you finally see something you want to go after, that's when you see the light bulb goes off, and now kids and men typically tend to move faster in a more focused manner. So vision is very, very important for me.
I like that. Okay.
And one of the things that we forget about sometimes, especially as we look at the negatives that happen in the absence of these things. So understand that the other thing that vision provides for a young male is hope. If I can believe for something, then as I'm going through the more difficult periods in my life, there is still this light that exists. The most dangerous thing is to have someone with all kinds of capability, a young man with plenty of energy and passion and no light.
Right.
So
Because they're going to put that
they're
somewhere.
going to put it somewhere. And we want them to put it in the best possible places. But without vision, there is always misdirection. And there is a lack of hope that is associated. And hopelessness is the breeding ground for negative, nefarious, high risk, and sometimes even criminal behavior. And we're not trying to suggest that that's where everybody ends up. But what we can say is when you talk to those, statistically look at those who are struggling and have found their ways into the system, penal system, one of the things you will universally hear is the hopelessness and the lack of vision that existed in their lives. And all of that passion went in the wrong direction. So there's enormous value to something that seems as simple as creating some purpose, some light, some vision, but it really becomes a touchstone or sort of a light in the darkness when you're going through all of this stuff, figuring out who you are. You need to have some place in which you're channeling all of that because you know where you're trying to get to.
If I could add to that very quickly. So in lower socioeconomic situations, this is especially important.
Right.
It's not that kids who live in inner cities don't have talent or academic potential. They lack vision.
Right.
They can't see beyond their neighborhood. They can't see beyond their block. And so when you have limited to no vision, again, you don't have a sense of purpose or direction. You then, as Alvean mentioned, start to get into all types of behaviors, which typically end up negative because you don't see any other recourse or options
Absolutely.
to
Right.
move forward.
Whereas in other families, there's an expectation. There was an expectation my kids would go to college.
Right.
Right.
There's an expectation your kids would go to
Right.
college.
Absolutely.
Not every family
Has that.
Absolutely.
And so creating that path. And I also want to say it has to sort of be the kid's path. You are
Yes.
not that way.
Right.
You clearly mentioned you were into sports, and it looks like he's into sports. But if
he wasn't?
arts or
Right.
if something else ignited his passion, if he was a science nerd, whatever it is,
Right.
you would
Yes.
help develop that.
Right.
We can't put that imprint. You have to be mini me.
Absolutely. And I didn't push sports.
I could tell.
He started in one sport. He's not in the sport that he's in now. And we put no pressure on him. What we try to do again early is expose him to many different things to see what he would want to go after. And so he's selected that. We support him as long as you keep your grades up.
Right.
You do other things. But it is important for the young boy to catch it on his own, and then he can run with it.
But again, you were right about the exposure because if he doesn't know what his options are,
Exactly.
he can't
doesn't know what to
find
pursue.
which one works for him.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And our job as parents is to nurture that thing. It's going to evolve multiple times.
That's what I was going to say too.
It will
and
evolve.
the first thing might not be
the last thing.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And quite frankly, our kids go to college, because you and I both have those that are in college, and they sometimes discover that there's something different that they want to do then. And whether your kid is in college or whether they're working, whatever that may be, the reality is that as the facts surrounding what you think you're interested in start to kick in, then you may discover that I had interest in it, but I don't have a commitment or a passion for that thing, and we may have to nurture something else. But our job as parents is to do the exposure, as Kevin mentioned, but in addition to that, we have to nurture what it is that our children seem to have an aptitude and interest in, and then make the correlation between the thing that you love doing and the things that you need to do.
Right.
So that
Right.
academics is necessary, and here's how this connects to that,
Right.
which helps to create that consistent motivation that even though I can't stand the teacher or I hate this subject, I recognize that I have to do this in order to get to the things that I want to do.
And then if the things you want change, you've still had the
Absolutely.
goal path.
Right.
You can
Absolutely.
recognize it and shift where you're going, but you've kept your options open
Absolutely.
because you had a vision in the first place.
And- Indeed.
Absolutely. And that happened to me in college too. I changed my major. And so, yeah, I went in thinking one thing, but then I had exposure to a different curriculum and ended up doing something else. But yet the vision was still to finish school.
Right.
See, that's
Right,
what my
right.
parents put in me. You're going to go to school.
Right.
You know, now how you figure that out is up to you. So the first one is vision. I mentioned VMA.
Right, okay.
You know, the second one, the M, is what you said earlier, is modeling. And this is really where fathers become especially important. Men, again, are visual creatures. So in most cases, we need a male figure to show us how to do it. And this becomes especially pronounced when men get into relationships and the other person is asking the man to do something and it's difficult for them because they've never seen it before. And this happens quite commonly in relationships. So part of the reason why fatherhood is so important, having a male presence, if not a father in the home, a coach, a male teacher,
An uncle,
someone,
a
yes,
grandfather.
someone that can
Absolutely.
really show them the way. It's because when they get older, then they'll understand how to navigate through certain situations. And a lot of men, unfortunately, don't have that male figure to kind of guide them along. So modeling is especially important. And you probably would do a very good correlation between those who are in prison for those who did not have
Right.
that presence of a male figure in their life to guide them along. So modeling is crucial.
So are there particular things that you try to model or that you think are important?
Yes. The biggest thing I try to model for my son is how I treat my wife,
Absolutely.
because he needs to understand how to treat women.
Because a lot of our cultural models are not what I want my children to be.
Absolutely.
Exactly
you
right.
know?
Right. So I make it a point, we make it a point, we're not going to argue in front of the kids. I don't want him to see that. Now he will see that we will have disagreement, but it's not
That's
gonna
what I
be-
was going to say. There's a difference between
Yes.
disagreeing and
And
arguing.
arguing.
Absolutely. He's not going to see me strike my wife. He's not going to see any of those things where, again, the culture defines it a different way.
Right.
So that alone, he's also going to see how I interact with his sister in the exact same way. So if you see me doing this, I don't expect you to do anything differently to your sister or to your mother. And more importantly, if and when you may find someone, you're not going to treat them any differently than how I treat your mother or sister. So that modeling is very important in and of itself. And then also the daily conversations of what it takes to be a man. You have to have those on a consistent basis. We talk through it, peer pressure, hard work, discipline, the things. If you really want to be good at this, you can't be lazy. You can't be on the video game all the time. You really have to put in the work. Those things we try to emphasize with him.
Well, and the modeling also just gets to one of the things you've said before, which is showing up.
Absolutely.
Because it has to be consistent.
Absolutely.
You can't just appear one day and say things.
Correct.
He has to see it and see it evolve as he changes.
And the consistency associated with that. Because the thing that we have to remember in terms of the modeling matters is that it is not what you say that your kids follow, it's what you do.
Exactly.
So if you can say all you want that academics are important, that conflict resolution in a positive way is important, that managing your money is important, but if they see that my parents never pick up a newspaper, I never see them read anything, I never see them sit down and, open a book of any sort. If I see that when you get angry, you cuss and you swear and you yell at people and you slam doors. If I see that, when it comes to money, you frivolously handle that and our lights are off. All of those things are teaching me something in terms of my management of these life skills, so to speak.
And it's subconscious.
Absolutely.
I don't think they realize that they're taking it in.
Right.
But they do.
Right, which is why
The good and the bad.
Absolutely.
Right, which is why statistically, if you grew up in a house where you saw your father be physical with your mother, you are far more likely to be an abuser yourself because you watched that modeled. Simultaneously,
it's what you know
Absolutely.
about
if you grow up in a
relationships.
positive household, where they value education, community involvement, faith, whatever that may be, you will find that those children growing up in those households will have very similar, through their own personality
Right,
lenses,
right.
very similar values themselves. It's because of the modeling factor.
Yeah, it's the same thing with parenting.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
We tend to fall back on the way we were parented. And if we
Yes.
don't think about what we're
Right.
projecting and how we're
Exactly.
doing things, we better hope model was good.
What's good?
Yes.
Because it becomes our default zones. We default to what we saw most frequently.
Yep.
That is our baseline. So modeling has an enormous impact.
It
Okay.
does. And so going back to the exposure piece for modeling very quickly before I go to the A. So within the African American community, we know 7 out of 10 children are raised without a father in the home. If you go to most schools, there are lack of
Elementary
male
schools.
elementary schools.
Especially.
There are a lack of male teachers.
Right.
So then where is that young boy going to interact with another male in his life? It becomes extremely important. If you don't have an uncle, where are you going to go? And so it really does make the single parent mom, you really have to think more critically about, okay, how are you going to expose
Right.
your son to someone so that he can see how it is supposed to be?
All right, so let's answer that because I think that's a hard question for a
Yes.
lot of single moms in the African American community who
Yes.
are white, who are Hispanic. I mean,
Absolutely.
it's not one race issue.
Oh,
It
no.
is
It's a
not.
generational.
It is, and
Indeed.
fatherhood is a challenge. And so then you go into the notion of, does she start to date, and do you introduce that particular, you have to be
A
careful with that.
stepfather in the picture too.
Right.
So.
Right.
And blended families are more pronounced. That doesn't necessarily mean that the father or the stepfather is the best person for that son. So you still have to think more critically. And it goes back to vision. Whatever that young man is interested in, maybe finding a male figure in that environment would be most helpful. So for example, if the son is not doing good in school, maybe it's the coach that should call and talk to the son and help him to understand, you're messing up your playing time here.
Right.
Because the coach is emphasizing you can't play unless you maintain a certain grade point average. Now that's backing up what mom is saying at
Right.
home.
Right.
And now you have congruence, even though you may not have a male presence in the home.
You've got coaches, you've got scout leaders, you've
Absolutely.
got music teachers,
You've got youth ministers, you've
Yes.
got
Yes.
tutors, you've got, the list goes on and on.
boys club. I mean, there are
Indeed.
a lot of people
Yes.
who are kind of there to help with that support.
But the thing
I
we
think.
have to
But you-
remember as moms is you have to be intentional about
You
it.
have to reach out and
You're
you have
going
to
to
ask,
have
and
to.
that's
It's not gonna be
really
magic.
hard. It's like, oh
You
no,
gotta
I can
do it.
handle everything.
Right.
I don't need help.
Right.
And,
Yes.
and you do. It's
You
not.
do.
There's no shame.
And there's nothing wrong with that. We are designed to work together. We are meant to be a collective people. And leaning on each other is a sign of strength rather than weakness. We've got to get rid of the notion that we've got to be super parents and have it all down all the time.
Right.
It's ridiculous and it's unnecessary stress. And our kids are the ones that suffer in addition to our stress levels.
Yes.
So
that's right.
let's
It's
stop
better
that.
for us too. Let's remember
Absolutely.
that.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Not trying to do it all.
Exactly. So the VMA, so the V is vision, the M is modeling, and the A is also important. It's accountability. We have to teach our boys the value of being accountable for their decisions, for their actions. And also in accountability, it goes to more earning rather than expecting.
Right.
So the one pet peeve I do have about sports today is that nowadays everybody gets
A trophy.
a trophy. I don't necessarily buy into that because I believe you get what you earn. You get what you have deserved. And so even with our son, sometimes, for example, he got a good report card one time and he came home and said, "Hey, what are you going to give me?" And I said, "Nothing." Because this is what you're supposed to do.
Right.
Right? So some measure of accountability in terms of your behavior, in terms of respect, in terms of school, in terms of how you're going to conduct yourself has to be there in the life of the young person. And they need to know what I am doing now could be taken away.
Right.
Now, here's the thing about parenting, and I've had to learn this. Whatever you say you're going to do,
Oh,
You
yeah.
better do it.
you have
Don't
to
say
back it
when
up.
you're mad. Stop and think.
Exactly.
Right.
Because if not, then that undermines your own credibility
Right.
as a parent. But we do have the responsibility to hold them accountable. And that's something that sometimes can be very challenging. We let kids get away with when we should not.
And I don't like gender stereotypes at all because everybody's different, but I think moms,
Right.
especially single moms trying to do it
Right.
all, have a tendency to forgive, have a tendency to
Yes.
intervene. And it is so hard to let your kid fail.
Yes.
It is
Yes.
so hard to let your kid be accountable for actions. And boy, if you intervene through, say, middle school, they're in for a hard landing
and-
somewhere.
Yes, it's true. And the
But
other thing
I
that
mean, I know that's a weak point of mine sometimes.
well, it's not just you. Moms in general, particularly single moms, we feel guilty that there's something that we didn't give to our kids.
Right,
And we have
it's
a
our fault
tendency
somehow,
to want to
or we can
overcompensate.
we like to fix things too,
Absolutely.
don't we, Alvin?
we want to fix it. We want to make it better. We want
Mm-hmm.
to ensure your soft landing. We want to do all of these things that actually don't help them become men. Because in the real world, they will not get coddled. Their mommy's not going with them to the boardroom or the meeting,
Mm-hmm.
and crying after something doesn't go your way is not going to work well for your respect. Not that there's anything wrong with emotion, but learning how to manage that emotion appropriately is going to be important as a man also. But we can't get so caught up in our own concerns for whether or not we did the perfect thing or we the perfect mom. Dads really don't worry about that kind of stuff in the same kind of way. They do the best they can and they keep it moving.
They
don't
do.
sweat
I
it
don't know
quite
if
the
they
way
show
we
it as
do.
much.
So our son had an incident at school, and he had to be disciplined. And as a part of the discipline, we told him he couldn't participate in a sports event. It hurt me because I obviously wanted him to be
You
in
want
it.
to go see and cheer him on.
Right,
and
but I had to
have him
stand on what
succeed.
I told him earlier. If you get in trouble, here's the consequence. And we had to follow through with it. It was painful to follow through with it, but we have to see the bigger picture.
Right.
You can't let emotions in the moment interfere with what you want him to be 5 years and 10 years down the line.
Right.
So if there's a little bit of pain, a little bit of guilt, over, in the moment, that's fine. But hopefully that will translate when he walks across the stage, that now he understands the value of accountability and making good decisions because you put that in him at a much earlier age.
So this wraps us right back around to the V, because as parents, we have to keep the vision
Absolutely.
and not
You
be
have
caught
to
up
see
in
it.
the moment. We have to
Absolutely.
know where we're going for age 18, age 21, age 35, what kind
Absolutely.
of people we are trying to raise.
Absolutely.
Indeed. The mission has to be greater than the moment. It's in the best interest of our kids, regardless of whether or not we like how it feels. We have to do what's best for them.
That is a hard thing in our culture. We are a now culture. We
Yes.
are a want it all right this minute. This
Microwave.
is what matters. We know Americans aren't saving for their retirement. We
Yes.
know that we don't do well with the long-term view.
It's true.
So as we as parents have to really keep that in mind.
Right. Easier said than done, but we
Yes.
have to do it.
The hard job.
That's what
is
parenting
hard.
But there's
is.
plenty of fun. Let's just get back to that. There's
Yeah.
still
There
plenty
is.
of wonderful moments and sporting events that you will
Yes.
get to go to, that
Yes, you
he
will.
will get to go to, because he learned from this.
Absolutely.
Right.
I joke with my wife all the time. I say, our son's got 5 more years here. Because he's got to lead a house.
That's, yeah.
And then when you start thinking of it in that respect,
Yeah, you say that, but mine rebounds.
right, I know, right? They come back, right? They come back. They come back, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then you think about, okay, if it really does mean he has 5 years, then what things do we want to make sure we have instilled in him? Because 5 years is going to go by fast.
It does. That's true.
So what are we going to make sure is in him so when he does leave, and if he does come back, but when he does leave, we will know that we have done what we needed to do.
Okay. And that prescription is VMA.
VMA.
Vision. Modeling. Accountability.
Accountability.
Thank you. Thank you
Our
so
pleasure.
much.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. I hope you have some vision of how to be that strong father figure, whether you are the actual father or whether it is the figure, and how important that is in the lives of our boys. Thanks for watching.